Today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet this super easy and super duper fast chunky mesh scarf. Now when I say quick, I'm not joking. This entire scarf from start to finish, including doing things like weaving in my ends and adding new balls of yarn, took a tiny smidgen over 2.5 hours. That's it. I even took a screenshot of my stopwatch on my phone to show you how long exactly this thing took. 2.5 hours. That's all I needed. Now, if I had made this scarf slightly shorter, then it would have been an under 2-hour make. It's so easy and so fast. So what you're going to need to make this scarf is as follows. You're going to need some chunky, proper chunky yarn. Now I use the Shapier's Namaste yarn. I use just over 2.5 balls. So you're going to need approximately 250 meters of nice thick chunky yarn. The color I used for my scarf is the shade Plough. You're also going to need a 9mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and a large eye darning needle for dealing with those ends. To begin, pop a slip knot onto your hook. Now if you want to change the width of your scarf, the pattern multiple is 2 plus 6. Now all that means is that you would chain in multiples of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 until your project was the width you wanted it to be, and then add 6 chains at the very end. For my scarf with my 9mm hook and my chunky yarn, I chained 26. Once you have the desired width of your scarf, we're going to begin by working into the 6th chain from our hook. Now this loop on your hook does not count as anything. You only want to count the fully formed chains hanging down below. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now for my scarf, I also worked into the back bumps. So if you look, you have these little V shapes, and if you turn your chain over, you have these little bumps at the back. This is the loop that I go under for my scarf. However, that's completely optional. You just go into whichever bit of the chain you find easiest. But for me, it's the back bump. I'm still holding onto that 6th chain, and into that 6th chain, as I rotate it round to find a little back bump there, we're going to work 1 double crochet stitch. So that's yarn over, go under the back bump, or as I say, whichever part of the chain you find easiest to get into. Then yarn over, pull your yarn back through. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the final 2, and that is your double crochet formed. Now these skipped chains here count as a double crochet and chain 1, but don't worry about that just yet. We'll come back to that on row 2. Now we're going to chain 1, skip a chain, and into the next chain work a double crochet. It can be a bit tricky working into this chain, so if you need to use your fingers like you'll see that I do, that's absolutely fine. Chain 1, skip a chain, double crochet into the next. We're going to do this all the way along. Chain 1, skip a chain, double crochet in the next. Keep repeating this all the way down your chain. Chain 1, skip a chain, double crochet in the next. So I've reached the very end of my chain here. You should be ending with a double crochet into that very last chain right by your slip knot. So your first row should look just like this. For row 2 is the pattern repeat row, but don't worry, I'll go over it a couple of times just so you're super confident moving forwards. All right, so we're going to chain 3 and turn your work. Just flip it over like the page of a book. Now we're going to skip these spaces in between your stitches. We're not going to work into those at all. We're only going to work into the top of the stitches from the row below, these double crochets. So that chain 3 at the beginning counts as a double crochet and a chain 1, so it's like a mock stitch. So we are going to leap straight into making a double crochet. Now we're going to work our double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the row below. So if you rotate your work just a little bit, you'll see you've got the V of the double crochet from the row below. You'll also have the V from your chain 1, but we're skipping right over that. And we're going to work under both loops of the V of the double crochet from the row below. So work your double crochet underneath both loops. And just as before, we're going to chain 1, skip a chain, so skipping right over this chain 1 space, and work a double crochet into the next stitch, which will be the top of your double crochet from the row below. So your double crochets will be nicely stacking on top of one another. Chain 1, skip the chain space, and work your double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the row below. And we're going to work this until we have run out of double crochets to work into the top of, and then stop when you get to this end one, and I'll show you how we work into this end row when dealing with these chains. So chain 1, skip the chain 1 space, and work a double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the row below, all the way across until you run out of double crochets to work into. So I have just worked my double crochet into the last full double crochet from the row below, and I still have this little chain area at the very end. So I'll show you how we tackle that. We chain 1, and if you look at your chains, we're going to skip one of the chains, just that first one there, right next to your double crochet, and we're going to work a double crochet into the second chain along. If it's easier for you to rotate round to see your little V's, skip 1 and work a double crochet into this chain. Now I tend to try and get 2 loops if possible. You want to try and find a spot. Generally it's this inside part of the chain here, and that's where you want to work your double crochet. So ideally you want 2 loops of that chain. It's a bit tight, but you want 2 loops of the chain. It's just a bit sturdier. Now if you can't do that, don't worry, just shove it on in there. But you can see I caught 2 loops there, 1, 2. Just shove it into whichever bit works for you. Ultimately, this is just going to be a nice super squishy scarf. So if the sides aren't as sturdy as perhaps you'd like for like a blanket, that's fine, because like I say, it's just a scarf. So you don't need to stress. This is an enjoyable, quick project, not something you need to worry about being absolutely perfect on. Okay, so this is how you'll be looking at the end of row 2. That was the pattern repeat row, and we're going to do this row over and over and over again until your scarf is the length that you want it to be. We'll go over it one more time. So for row 3 is simply a repeat of row 2. So we're going to chain 3, turn your work and work a double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the row below, skipping over these chain 1 spaces. Then chain 1, skip the chain 1 space and double crochet into the top of the double crochet from the row below. We're going to work this chain 1, skip 1, double crochet all the way along until you run out of true double crochet stitches, which will be 1 from the end over here. Once you've reached the other side and you've run out of double crochet stitches to work into, you'll be left with just these little chains at the end. So to finish, chain 1, skip one of these chains, this very first one, and work into the second. So now we only have 3 chains, so you're going to be aiming for that middle chain. So skip a chain and work into the second of those 3 chains from the row below. Again, try and catch 2 loops. Take a moment just to ensure all your stitches are stacking up on top of each other. And repeat this row back and forth until you run out of yarn or you need to change to add a new ball of yarn. And I'm going to show you how to do that right in the middle here. So chain 3, turn, double crochet into that first double crochet stitch. So skip over the chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the chain space, double crochet into the top of the double crochet stitch. If you were running out of yarn and you needed to bring in your second ball of yarn, I'm going to show you with a separate color just for some high contrast. This is how you join a new ball of yarn halfway through your project. So you want to make sure that you've still got a decent long amount left, because you're going to want a nice long tail for weaving in. So I'm going to chain 1 and then I'm going to begin my double crochet stitch, but I'm going to change to my new yarn, and this is exactly the same method for if you were changing color. So I'm going to yarn over and go into the top of the double crochet. I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first 2, and then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to drop that tail and I'm going to bring in my new ball of yarn. Now again, leaving a tail that you can weave in, I'm just going to put the loop over my hook and draw that through those 2 remaining loops on my hook. Then drop that tail, keep it at the back of your work for a minute, chain 1 and continue as normal with your double crochets. Now do just a couple of stitches for a second. So that's 1, to chain 1, do another 1. And then I'm just going to pause crocheting for a minute. And I'm just going to pop in a little knot. Don't pull it too tight, because if you pull it really, really tightly, you're going to distort your stitches on the front here. But I've just done a gentle knot, and then I'm just going to tie it again. Especially when working with this sort of roving type yarn, you definitely want a secure knot, because it wants to come undone. Then those 2 tails are secure and you can continue crocheting your project with your new ball of yarn attached. Now, if you wanted to change color, obviously you don't want to be changing color midway through a row. The best place to do that is at the end of the row. Now the method is exactly the same. So I've just chained 1 and I'm going to work my very last stitch into the second of those 3 chains. But again, I'm going to stop before my final yarn over and draw through 2. So when I've still got 2 loops, again, I'm going to drop the old color, snip it, leaving a nice long tail for weaving in. bring in my new colour, and the method is exactly the same. Finish the stitch with the new colour and then continue on to your next row. Work a couple of stitches first. And then gently knot your two tails together. It's just a gentle knot so you don't distort things. And then continue crocheting. So once your scarf is the length that you want it to be, to finish your project, you simply chain one after your very final stitch, and then we're going to snip our yarn again, leaving a nice long tail for weaving in. Then pull that up through and out and pull it tight, and then grab a large eye needle and we can tackle these ends. So to weave in your ends, when dealing with chunky yarn, it can be very difficult to thread that needle. So what I like to do is fold the yarn over my needle and pull it and pinch it tight. Then that tight little loop is what I put through the needle. Then it's nicely on your needle and we can go ahead and weave in our ends. Now, there's no real science to this. What you want to be doing is working down through your stitches, back along, up, down, and weaving them in and out until you run out of yarn. So the first thing I do is just come down. It's great on this roving yarn, you can really see what I'm doing here. I just come down some of these loops. So I've just put my needle right through the center of that stitch, and I'm just pulling it down nice and snug. Then I'm going to run this yarn tail in, up and around, but always sort of going through, catching loops as I go. So I'm going through the chain space, then underneath the base of my stitches, catch the loops of some of those chains. As you can see, there's no massive science to it. Under some more loops of the bottom of a stitch, and then maybe I'll go up. I'll pick up some more loops of the stitch itself and pop out at the top. Go through that next chain, catching some loops as I go, and then I'll come back down the stitch. I'm literally just going in and out. Sometimes I even come through the stitch, especially with this roving yarn. It's got a real tendency to want to untwist. So just keep going until your ends are woven in. You want to do this with all of them, where you've changed colour, added new balls of yarn, and your very starting tail over here. Once you've woven in these ends, you can go ahead and snip those tiny little excess bits off. Give it a little stretch into shape, and your chunky mesh scarf is complete. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you go on to make these really lovely, quick and fast scarves for yourself. And until next time, happy crocheting. Bye.